Okay, good afternoon. This is me coming to you here at this digital conference. I'd like to thank Dr. Yates and the organizers and everybody for inviting me to participate. My paper I'm going to talk about today is this article in the International Journal of Cultural Property on the Lysi frescoes, which are a series of frescoes from Cyprus, which were acquired in the 80s by the Menil Foundation. So I am speaking to you all here this afternoon on a spring day in Houston, Texas, in the neighborhood of Montrose, at the Montrose at the Menil Foundation. Behind me, you can see the Menil a little bit. There's some people walking around. I didn't want to bother them and run into somebody with my selfie stick here. But the Menil Foundation is really a neat, special museum, not only for the United States, but especially for Houston, Texas. The Menils were a couple who have been famously called the Medicis of contemporary art. They earned their fortune in the oil industry, basically, and Dominique de Menil especially used her fortune and her time to cultivate and acquire a lot of surrealist art, contemporary art, works of art from antiquity, and some other objects. And I'm going to talk to you all a little bit today about the museum, maybe give you a bit of a walking tour, give you a sense of what the Menil Foundation is like, and go and visit something called the Byzantine Fresco Chapel, which was purpose-built in order to house a series of frescoes from Lysi and from the island of Cyprus. So behind me, over here, is the Menil's main building. It's closed at the moment to redo its floors. There's a plane flying overhead. Hopefully my audio is okay. But you can get a sense maybe of how kind of unobtrusive it is. It's most of it's only a single story. It fits in here nicely within the neighborhood, within the gray bungalows. The building itself was was designed by Renzo Piano, the famous Italian architect, who's put his name to many wings and famous buildings, of course, all over the world, and a lot of museum buildings especially. And this is one of his first forays into museum building. And you can see, I don't know if you can get a sense from as far away as I am, but it's got, this is one of his first uses of his wave feature on the tiles on the roof, which allows light to come in, but not too much light, so as to allow just enough natural light in, but not too much, so that it might damage the works of art. So I'm here at the Menil campus. It's a beautiful day, and inside the building behind me at the Menil is a series of rooms with contemporary art, with surrealist art, with art from the classical era as well. There's Cycladic figurines, there's African art, and the animating purpose behind that display of art is you bring everything to the table as a viewer. So a lot of museums will have a lot of didactic material. There will be a lot of wall plaque material, letting you know what to think about a work of art, letting you know where it came from, letting you know maybe the era where it came from. At the Menil, in most of the works of art in there, there's very little, if any, didactic material. There's no curatorial presence at all. It's what do you think of this image, this piece of sculpture, this work of art. It's a very pleasurable way to visit a museum and experience and look at works of art. But it also works better for some of the art at the museum than others. So it decontextualizes a lot of the art. For something like contemporary art or surrealist art, that can be really effective and can be really an enjoyable experience for me personally. But there's some rooms with Cycladic figurines and antiquities where I think that approach doesn't work very well at all. So I'm going to stroll over here and head towards the Byzantine fresco chapel. Hopefully I don't fall over or run into anything. I've become the thing I guess that I hate is somebody at a museum complex with a selfie stick, but I'm doing my best here. So let's talk a little bit about Cyprus. So we're gonna the article that I wrote about is the long-term loan of a series of frescoes from a chapel near Lysi on the island of Cyprus. Cyprus is an island which sits basically in the Mediterranean, just below Turkey. In the 70s, Turkey invaded the island. It's open to speculation whether that invasion was justified or not. Turkey would say it wasn't justified in order to protect Turkish Cypriots. The European Court of Human Rights and others have said no, that it was a violation of international law to do that. The conflict itself isn't terribly important, other than it led to a series of destabilizations, and Greek-speaking Cypriots were displaced to the southern half of the island, and there's a northern half of the island where the Turkish-speaking Cypriots went. So the mosques would have suffered in the southern part of the island to some extent, but to a much greater extent, churches on the northern part of the island suffered as a result of the loss of the population, the Christian population there. And so, of course, looting took place. And one of the objects that was looted, one of the sites that was looted was this small Byzantine chapel, which is in Lysi, near the town of Lysi in Turkish-occupied Cyprus. None of that was apparent when Dominique de Menil acquired the frescoes, and the Menil Foundation acquired the frescoes. So let me set the stage for what would have been known about the frescoes at the time she acquired them. So she would have basically been made aware that there was a series of these frescoes which were for sale, and they are being offered for sale by a Turkish antiquities middleman, looter, named Aydin Dikmen. Aydin Dikmen was notorious for being one of the most active antiquities acquirers and looters operating in Cyprus. And so, of course, the Byzantine era church would have been present in many countries throughout the Mediterranean. And Dikmen used that fact to great effect and invented and fabricated basically a story about where these frescoes would have come from. And he had a fake diagram, and he painted a picture basically that would say that these frescoes were going to be rescued, and that they were going to be destroyed by development, essentially, if they weren't acquired. So Dominique de Menil and other officials from the Menil went and had a look at the frescoes in the 80s in a Munich apartment, in a Munich flat, with Dikmen there to show them, and they would have been they were in very poor condition. Dominique de Menil talked about them as being works of art that almost like a patient who needed to go to the hospital, who was very sick. And so these frescoes would have been removed from the chapel itself. Basically, the looters used a crude method to remove these frescoes. They would have taken plaster and strips of gauze and attached these to the chapel itself, and then sawed them or cut them away from the stone. And so these were then removed. So they were in a number of fragments. One of the works of art that I'll talk about, and I'll show you a picture that's reprinted in the article. Y'all will have access. Sorry, I'm bouncing around here. But so you can see here the top of the dome. So that's the dome that would have been taken from the Lysi chapel, and that's as it was recreated over here at the Byzantine fresco chapel. But if you think about a plaster dome or a fresco dome, how difficult that must have been to recreate all the damage that the looters would have done. So Dominique de Menil, she's at the Munich apartment with other officials from the Menil Foundation. They were keen to acquire the frescoes, but they didn't want to acquire looted or illicit material. So that would set her apart perhaps from many of the other art acquirers and antiquities acquirers operating in the 80s and even other decades, of course. And so at this meeting with Aidan Dickman, she offered to give him a small sum of money to basically hold on to these works of art. And she then went about doing her due diligence. So we talk in the antiquities trade, sorry, a truck's going by. We talk in the antiquities trade a great deal about what due diligence looks like, about what due diligence is. Well, you know, I argued in the piece here that she really did an outstanding job, and the officials at the Menil did an outstanding job of really doing an effective due diligence process. So what they would have done is, so what they did is she hired an attorney. She hired a former attorney named Herbert Brownell, who was an attorney in Eisenhower's cabinet, and he basically wrote a letter to 9 countries where the Byzantine Empire would have existed, would have been operating, and says, look, these frescoes are in Western Europe. We have no reason to believe that they're stolen or looted, but please let us know. Please let us know if there's any reason why we shouldn't acquire them. And so it's a form letter that he sent to all 9 countries. And the letter and Cyprus responded. The autocephalous Greek Orthodox Church, so the Greek Church of Cyprus, responded and said basically, yep, those look familiar. Those would have come from the church at Lysi. And so Dominique de Menil then had a tough choice. She knows where the frescoes are. They're currently in the hands of Aidan Dickman. She knows that his story is a fabrication, it's a lie. And she also knows Cyprus would like these back. But she also knows the very poor condition that these frescoes are in. So she needs to try to decide what to do. What she ends up doing is acquiring the frescoes with the permission of the Greek Orthodox Church. So she the Church of Cyprus, rather. So she doesn't acquire them with an idea that she's going to hold on to them forever. Instead, she acquires them in a temporary way. So that's another paradigm that we've seen play out in a lot of other museum acquisitions, where museums take temporary control of a work of art, and with the permission perhaps of the nation of origin or the original owner, and they have a kind of a collaborative ongoing relationship. And so I think the Menil was really one of the first museums to enter into that kind of an arrangement with the source community. I'm going to take a pause here. So behind me you can see something called the Rothko Chapel. These are, it's a sacred space. It's a non-denominational sacred space that if you do get a chance to come to Houston, you should definitely check out here on the Menil campus, because it's a really special thing. There's a very lovely pond here behind. I think I got a tree in the way, don't I? There's a very lovely pond and some art, a work of art here. I'm going to flip the camera around. There's a work of art here called Broken Obelisk by Barnett Newman, which was originally intended to go in front of Houston City Hall, but Houston City Hall at the time of the civil rights movement was not ready. Houston wasn't ready to have a work of art like that, so confrontational. And so the Menils offered to put that work of art here on the Menil campus. So behind me you have the Rothko Chapel, and I'm going to turn around this way, And over here is behind me, which and I'll walk you over there in a second, is the Byzantine fresco chapel. So here on the campus, we just walked over from the main building. There's the Rothko chapel here. There's the Byzantine fresco chapel. The Byzantine fresco chapel really fits in a neat way with the Menil campus. So, Dominique de Menil acquires the frescoes with the permission of the Church of Cyprus. And they have a temporary loan arrangement. So I think it was 15 years or 30 years. The number escapes me. It's in the article. But it's a temporary loan, basically. And so she's paying a significant sum of money to fix up the frescoes, basically, to conserve them, to put them back in the original condition, or as close as she can get to the original condition. I'm going to cross the street here. And in exchange, the church knows where these objects are. They know that they're going to be in a safe place, and they can have them returned when Cyprus is ready to have them returned. The acquisition, though, we can still view it perhaps with some controversy, and maybe you think it was the wrong thing to do for Dominique de Menil to pay a large sum of money to a basically at that time known antiquities looter. So Ada and Dickman received money for looting frescoes. There's no way around that. She paid a looter. She ransomed basically a work of art. He profited off of the destruction of heritage. The heritage was able to be fixed up, recreated, but still there's a problem. I think if you think about it in those terms. But on the other hand, one of the things that they were able to do is create this fresco chapel. So here on the Menil campus, that's what I'm walking to now. Here on the Menil campus, they created what's called the Byzantine fresco chapel, purpose-built, $3 million. I think at the time it cost $3 million to create this stone building, and it's right in front of me here. So I'm going to turn around so you can kind of get a sense of what it's like when you walk up to it. It's a kind of a rough stone building here on the outside. I can't take you inside with the camera, but above me here is a large space, and so in that large space would have been a recreation of the chapel at Lysi. So it would have been the exact proportions that the chapel at Lysi would have had, with the dome, with the four apses, basically. I don't know if that's the right architectural term, but that's what I'm pulling out for you here. And so those proportions mimicked the Lysi chapel. It was made of basically frosted glass, and so the frescoes harkened back or made mention of architecturally the original context of the Lysi chapel. And so here at the Menil, so the Byzantine frescoes were here. It was the only Byzantine era frescoes in the United States. To my knowledge, I think it's the only Byzantine fresco that were on such long-term display here in the United States. They were here in Houston for many, many years. Received regular viewership. I don't know if they got a lot of foot traffic. I think, I don't know if you can get a sense, but it's still a kind of quiet corner of the Menil campus over here. And so it was a chance for people in Houston, people in this region, people in the United States to see Byzantine era sculpture. Not sculpture, art. But I think the year was 2012, but in 2012 the Church of Cyprus asked for the frescoes back, and they've been returned. So those frescoes are now gone. They're not here in Houston anymore. They're back in Cyprus. And if you've had a chance to visit Cyprus and seen these frescoes, do send me an email, please. I'd like to hear what your reaction is to seeing those frescoes. So I'm still here at the building, though. The frescoes are gone. Why is this still a neat thing to talk about and think about? Well, the Menil has still used this space. So if you think about what the fresco would have looked like, In the dome of the building is an image of Christ the Pantocrator, the creator of the universe, I think is the translation there. And there would have been the apostles surrounding him, and it almost would have been, Christ looking down from the heavens on you in this small chapel. The temporary installation, so the Menil is still conducting temporary installations here. The first temporary installation at the Fresco Chapel was something called the Infinity Project. The artists who created that project escape me now when I'm on camera here, but I'll post in the abstract a link where you can have a look at that Infinity Project. The Infinity Project was really cool. It was a very dark room, so it was the same room where the Fresco Chapel would have been created, but it was a work of art that was a series of mirrors and lights that were hung from the ceiling, and they would rotate, so they'd spin first very slowly and then quicker. And inside would have, and so when you went in, you'd sit there and you watched the mirrors spinning around and around. And the audio, there was audio, and it was a sound frequency of the Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 leaving the solar system, basically. So it's a kind of a neat reference to Christ the Pantocrator, I think, when I saw it. Kind of thinking about the heavens and the universe from a 21st century perspective, from a very different perspective. That exhibit is done. Now they have another temporary exhibition called the Fabiola Project, and I'll post a link to that as well, which is a really neat space. So the space is still being used. It's still referencing the Byzantine frescoes, but it's updating it and making it contemporary in a lot of ways. And so it is still a really neat space, and the Menil is still making use of the building and making use of the space. So I just want to walk over here and just show you the limited reference that the Menil has to the Byzantine fresco chapel, and the signage that we have making reference to the long-term loan. So there was at one time a sign here that talked about. So this is the sign for the Byzantine fresco chapel and the Fabiola project. There had been at one point a sign referencing the history here of the Byzantine fresco chapel. There's some fine print telling good Texans not to bring their firearms into the fresco chapel. There's a small sculpture here which talks about the partners and benefactors as a consecrated ground. There's no way, you're going to be able to really get a good sense or see this from my camera. It's really faint even to read when I'm standing right in front of it here. But it talks a bit about the history of the Byzantine fresco chapel. And here's the entrance. This is probably as close as I can get. Here's the entrance itself, and there's a small reflecting pool and that takes you inside to the chapel, to the building. So I mentioned earlier, probably about 10 minutes ago, the philosophy of the Menil, which was in terms of how it displays its art, which is basically you bring everything as a viewer. There's not a lot of curatorial voice or a museum curator telling you what to think or how to think about some of these works of art. And that was always really very different from how you'd come in and view the Byzantine fresco chapel. It was all about the context. So there were books in the entryway here. There's the signage out front, and it really was the Menil being proud of and telling the story of what the Menil Foundation did, what Dominique de Menil herself did in terms of bringing those frescoes from Cyprus, from their nearly ruined state, into Houston and having them on temporary display here. But it always struck me as kind of an off note, and that's what I wrote here in the article, is that it was very different from how you'd think about the antiquities, for example, that are over in the Menil Collection, the Socratic figurines and the red figure vases and the Greek pottery especially, that knowing what we know about the antiquities trade and the acquisition of that material was very, very likely to have been looted. So I hope you've enjoyed my walking tour here of the Menil campus and talking to you a little bit about the Byzantine fresco chapel, what it was and what it is. At the very least, hopefully you get a sense of what how the chapel fit in here to the Menil campus, and how it's still being used, and how in some ways the Menil is still telling the story of that rescue by still having the chapel here and having at least a little bit of limited signage. So I hope this has been informative. Hopefully I didn't bounce the camera around too much. I want to thank again Dr. Yates and everybody at Trafficking Culture for the kind invitation. I look forward to consuming everyone else's talks and presentations here at the digital conference. So I'm going to sign off for now, and I will talk to you all soon.